Hi everyone, welcome back to Crafting with Slavy. Today I bring to you a card that I created using the Fawn Magic Iris dies. It is a Father's Day card that is for my friend's husband. They have two small kids, so it felt really fitting to use Fawns upon a star. I am just showing you all the different pieces that I used to create the card today. Specifically the Magic Iris. So I'm using the add-on to create a panel, and I went ahead and did a whole bunch of ink blending. I also used the Fawn stitched hillside borders there to create a couple of different grass mound things to put my critters on, just to add a little bit of an interest to the card. So here I am using some purple tape to prep my surface. I am putting all of the pieces together so that the Magic Iris is very seamless in how I assemble it at the end. Now, you'll have to pardon me, this is my first time using this set of dies, and I didn't do a test card ahead of making this video just because I am a little bit short on time. So I've made a lot of mistakes in here, and I chose not to remove them because I think it's important to know that, you know, as crafters we make mistakes. It's about what we do with those mistakes that defines how we live our life, really. So here I am going in with some picked raspberry, and this is also my first time creating a night sky background, one of those galaxy panels. I just love them. I think they're beautiful, but I hadn't created one before, so this is also a learning curve for me for that. There I was using Blueprint Sketch, and now I'm going in with Wilted Violet, and I was just trying to get a really good blend of those three colors before I went around the border with Black Soot. Okay, so now that I've finished with the Black Soot, I am just using another brush and I am putting the picked raspberry onto my little arrow that goes on the piece that I'm working on right now. I have to go back in and do a little bit more ink blending just to cover up those white spots, which is fine. I knew that I was going to have to do that when I started. I have to say though, I think next time I would just start with the ink blending and then remove it and finish the ink blending separately, because it was difficult to blend out those colors and to get rid of those harsh lines. Then from there, I decided that I wanted to add some of the liquid stardust from Fawn, and what I did is I just took some water and I put it into one of my little things there on the side on my media mat, and I just splattered it all over the panel. I think because this was my first time doing a galaxy background, I think the next time that I do this I will actually splatter it with maybe some white paint color or just separately all on its own. I don't know, I'll have to play around with it. I then went in with forest moss and ground espresso. So I did forest moss on the top of these hillsides and ground espresso on the bottom just to give it a little bit more contrast. At the end, I ended up smooshing some of that forest moss onto my media mat and mixing it with some water and creating splatter that way, just to give it a little bit more interest and add texture, because it's supposed to be kind of grassy hillsides. So that worked out really well and I was quite happy with the result. Okie dokes. So this was kind of the beginning of the end for me. I had seen a lot of videos of people doing ink blending over these sausage pieces, and I kept thinking, I can totally do this and it'll be fine. But where I went wrong was that at this stage is when I went into ink blend. And as you can see on my panel, I put the color so that it kind of blends over top of itself there, and I ended up with lines, and then I realized at the end that I couldn't quite get it to line up. So if you're going to do this, my recommendation would be stick to either a single color or an all-over blend, and don't try to make these pieces match perfectly what is on your panel, because inevitably you're going to end up disappointed. Okay, now here, I just went in with some water and splattered the little sausage pieces to give them a little bit of that contrast and to match the night sky. I didn't go back in with liquid stardust. I didn't think I needed to, so that worked out. Next, I am going to stamp out all of my images, and my ink pad is super dry, so I ended up having to stamp these 3 times, but if you're going to do that, I do recommend using something like a Misty like I am here, because it'll allow you to stamp in the exact same spot. I did cut out all the elements in Upon a Star. I didn't realize at the time that not all of them had die cuts, so that's okay. I didn't end up using die cut, or my apologies, I didn't end up die cutting some of them. And then I left the heart. I wanted to put the heart in the middle of that panel so that when you opened up the magic iris, that's what you were looking at, and I knew I was going to heat emboss it instead of doing a die cut, so that's why I didn't do that one. And then from there, I colored these guys using my Copic markers, so I am going to come back when all the coloring and die cutting is done, and then we'll talk about assembly. Just kidding, I'm gonna come talk to you right now. So this paper that I'm using is a mixed media paper, and as you can see, I had a lot of feathering of my Copic markers here, and I didn't add a lot of color, but I wanted to include this because I ended up having to switch to the smooth bristle board that I have from Strathmore. It's the 300 series. I've linked it below, and I followed the exact same process. Stamped it the 3 times to get a good impression on account of my ink pad being really dry. And then I went in with the same colors. I ended up adding a darker color to the fox, which you'll notice, but I actually ended up layering a lot more heavily with the ink on this round, and I didn't get nearly as much feathering as I did with the other paper. So if you are new to Copic markers like I am and you're still testing things out, I do recommend doing some swatches or just playing around and coloring your critters on multiple different papers just to see how the paper reacts with your Copic coloring, because it's not always what you expect it to be. Alrighty, so onto the card assembly. I had cut out 3 each of the dad letters from Oliver's Stitched ABCs, and I am just in the process of gluing them together. I like adding dimension this way because it ends up being really seamless. You don't have to use so much foam tape, and it doesn't get squooshed in weird ways when you mail these cards. And I am definitely going to be mailing this, so I want to make sure that when it reaches its destination, it still looks really great. From there, I have taken my hillside borders and I'm just planning out where I'm going to put my sentiment. I didn't like any of the sentiments in Upon a Star for Father's Day, so I actually reached for my Superstar set and I pulled out I Look Up to You, and then I put Dad at the end. So I just positioned it so that it looks kind of nice, and I knew I was gonna white emboss this. So I removed all my pieces once everything was lined up, hit this with my anti-static powder tool, heavily, and then stamped away. I used Ranger embossing ink, and then I went in with the super fine Ranger embossing powder in white and heat set it with my heat gun. I then prepped my background panel with the same anti-static powder tool, and I actually went in with some of the stamps from the Upon a Star stamp set. There was some solid stamps, and I thought it would be a really cute match to the heart that I'm going to put in the circle in the middle there. So I stamped with the Ranger embossing ink, and then I used the superfine gold Ranger embossing powder, which is really beautiful. It dries it sets really smooth. And I was really happy with the result. You can kind of see it, how it starts to sparkle as the embossing powder melts. You'll really see it when I do the circle, the circle sentiment with the heart in it. Lessons for the future: take the tape off. My embossing powder got stuck all over the back of the tape, and thankfully I didn't waste too much, but definitely better to be able to put it back in the jar than have it get stuck. Alright, so like I mentioned before, this is my first time assembling the Magic Iris. So for those of you who are paying attention, you'll notice that I actually put my sausage pieces here in the wrong order. So they ended up not matching, and I didn't realize until later on in the video. And I also taped in the totally wrong ways. So my recommendation to you is, if you are just starting to build these Magic Iris cards, which are oh so much fun, do use a dry adhesive, so like tape or just tape. I used my tape runner that I have to get the tape on there, which was really easy to remove, and I didn't press very hard every time that I added a piece to test it, which ended up being my saving grace because I was able to correct my mistakes. But by all means, don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes, or do a test card. That works too. The other thing that I could have done better was attaching that piece that I'm attaching right now before I attached the actual iris to the panel. I ended up having to do some tweaking, which is fine. It ended up working and the panel works just fine. The magic iris functions just fine, but it definitely would have made life a little bit easier if I had just attached it ahead of time, because I had to do a lot more cutting, and as you can see, there's still some white parts left, so I had to go ahead and fix that. I then went ahead and put 1/4-inch foam tape all the way around the back, making sure to not put any foam tape where it would interfere with the mechanism of the iris. So on the left hand side there, I put very little, only down to where that arm would extend down to, and not beyond that, just to make sure that it was functioning properly. And when I was editing this video, I realized that I should have put tape on where those little stabilizer arms are, and I forgot to do that. But you know what? The card worked just fine, and the recipient will never know unless they watch this video, in which case I'm sorry, but it still works. And then because of the finagling I had to do with the arm, I had to go in and fix it. So add a little extra glue, give it a little bit more stabilization in there in the internal mechanism. And once I did that, it worked just fine. So then I went ahead and I assembled the front of my panel and made my little scene. And once I was happy with my scene, I realized that my little bunnies didn't have colored noses, so I went in with R20. And this is my card. I hope you guys had fun and enjoyed this video today. I certainly had a lot of fun making it, and I'm sure I'm going to be making a lot more magic iris card videos in the future because it is really versatile and I really loved it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and have a great day. Bye.